PHP can perform a wide range of calculations, from simple arithmetic to trigonometry. In this chapter, we'll look only at basic arithmetic. There are many practical applications for using calculations in a PHP script, such as calculating totals in an online store, or converting units such as Fahrenheit to Celsius or yards to meters. And in programming languages like PHP, it's often important to keep count inside a loop that performs a repeated action. Using PHP to do such calculations is generally straightforward, but there are some peculiarities that might trip you up. In this video, we'll focus on using arithmetic operators. Depending on how you count them, PHP has 6 or 7 arithmetic operators. Minus is used both for negation and for subtraction. Plus should also be instantly recognizable as being for addition. Keyboard limitations result in slightly different symbols being used for multiplication and division. An asterisk performs multiplication, and a / is used for division. These all work exactly the way you would expect. However, the modulus operator, or modulo as it's often called, might not be so familiar. It returns the remainder of a division. The last operator, the exponentiation operator, requires a minimum of PHP 5.6. It raises the value on the left to the power of the value on the right. Let's switch to an editing program to see these operators in action. I've opened 3 files from the chapter 4 04_01 folder of the exercise files, and in this one, arithmetic_01.php, on line 2, A is defined as 5 and B is defined as 2. And then there's a series of simple calculations using arithmetic operators with A and B. And if we load this into a browser, we see the results. The first one is -5, then this is the addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Surprisingly, it doesn't matter if you add a space between the minus sign and the variable when making it negative. So here on line 5, if I put my cursor in there and press the spacebar several times, and then save and reload this page in the browser, it's still -5. As long as the expression isn't ambiguous, PHP ignores the white space. Let's try combining multiplication, division, and subtraction in a single calculation. Normal body temperature in degrees Fahrenheit is commonly regarded as 98.6, so let's use PHP to convert that to degrees Celsius. So we'll create a variable for our degrees Fahrenheit and assign 98.6 to that. Then we need another variable for our degrees Celsius, and we'll start the calculation with the degrees Fahrenheit and subtract 32, then divide by 9 and multiply by 5. Then let's display the result using echo, and we'll have our degrees Celsius and concatenate onto that a string which will contain the HTML entity for degrees and an uppercase C. If we save that and reload this page in the browser, we get the wrong result. Now, if you were paying attention at school, you'll know exactly why we've got the wrong result. It's because multiplication and division take precedence over addition and subtraction. So we need to wrap the subtraction in parentheses to perform that part of the calculation first. So here, just before the degrees Fahrenheit, opening parenthesis and then after 32, that will now give this precedence, and we'll save that, reload the page in the browser, and now get the correct result, which is 37 degrees Celsius. So that works exactly the same as you will have learned at school. What might be unfamiliar from school days is the modulus operator. So let's take a closer look at that in arithmetic_02.php. Again, we've got 5 as A and 2 for B, and we're using ordinary division here. If we load this into the browser, the result is 2.5. But if we change the operator from the ordinary division operator to the modulus operator, which is a percentage sign, save that and reload, this time the result is 1. 2 doesn't divide into 5 an exact number of times. The result is 2 and 1 left over. So 5 modulus 2 produces that remainder of 1. Modulus division can be quite useful. If you use modulus division by 60, you can convert times measured in seconds into minutes and seconds, or minutes into hours and minutes. Another use of modulo division is to find out whether a number is odd or even. When divided by 2, an even number leaves no remainder. So let's say we change this from 5 to 50. Save that. We're now 50 modulus 2. If we reload that into the browser, the answer is 0. So we know that the number is even. Now, we can see the numbers here, but don't forget that PHP is often working with dynamically generated values. So working out whether a number is odd or even can be very useful, and that's a good example of using modulus division. Just a word of caution about the modulus operator. It always converts the values on either side to integers before performing the calculation. Let's just change this from 50 to 5.8, and we'll change B to 2.9. Now, that actually should produce 0, but if we save that and reload it in the browser, the answer is 1. And the reason for that is both of these have been converted to integers first. So this A is converted to 5, B is converted to 2. 2 into 5 is 2 with 1 over, so that's why we get this 1 as the result using that modulus operator. If you're wondering whether PHP has an equivalent operator that ignores the remainder and just returns the whole number of times the value on the left can be divided, the answer is no, but we'll look at integer division later in this chapter. Let's round off our look at arithmetic operators with the exponentiation operator, and there's an example of that here in arithmetic_03.php. Again, A is 5, B is 2, and we're now using the exponentiation operator, which is 2 asterisks next to each other, and if we load this into the browser, the result is 25, so it's 5 squared. Now this will work only in PHP 5.6 or later. If you're using an older version of PHP, you need to use the pow function, which does exactly the same thing. Let's just comment that line out, and then on the next line we'll echo the pow function. That takes 2 arguments. The first one is A, that's the value that you want to raise, and the second one is the value by which you want to raise it, the power by which you want to raise it. If we save that and reload the page in the browser, it gives us exactly the same result. So using pow in older versions of PHP will do the same as using the exponentiation operator in PHP 5.6 or later. So that's how you use the arithmetic operators in PHP to perform basic calculations. Addition, multiplication, subtraction, and division all work as you would expect. Multiplication and division take precedence over addition and subtraction. So if you mix them in the same calculation, as we did here, you need to wrap in parentheses the part that you need to have calculated first. Modulus division uses the percentage sign as the operator, and it returns the remainder of a division. And the exponentiation operator raises the value on the left to the power of the value on the right, but it's available only in PHP 5.6 or later. Very often, when performing a calculation, you want to reassign the result to the same variable. For example, you might want to keep a running total of values. In common with other programming languages, PHP has a useful shorthand for this type of calculation. I've opened combined.php, which you can find in the chapter 4, 04_02 folder of the exercise files. This begins by assigning 5 to total, then on the next line, we add 2 to total and reassign the result back to total. Then we display total. So if we load this into a browser, it displays the result, which is 7. This works, but it's inconvenient to have to type total twice. It's much simpler to use a combined operator that performs the calculation and assigns the result in a single operation. Let's see how that's done. I'm going to add in a new line here, then comment out that previous one, and we'll have total, and then you immediately precede the assignment operator with the arithmetic operator, so plus equals 2. And if we save that and reload this page in the browser, we get exactly the same result. So what this is doing is it's adding 2 to total and reassigning the value to that variable. And if you use JavaScript, you're probably familiar with this construction. It's the same, and it's used in many other programming languages, and it also works with all other arithmetic operators. So let's just continue our calculations. This time we'll subtract, so total, then minus equals, and we'll take off 3 this time. If we save, currently we're 7, so the result should be 4. And indeed it is. And if we carry on, we'll have the total, and this time we will multiply. So multiply equal, and we'll multiply by 4. Save. Currently we're 4, we're multiplying by 4, so the result should be 16, and indeed it is. So that's how you work with the combined arithmetic operators. If you haven't come across this shorthand in other languages, combined arithmetic operators can look rather strange. So let's review how they work. The arithmetic operator is placed immediately in front of the equals sign. This has the effect of performing the calculation and assigning the result back to the variable on the left. So total plus equals b means add b to total. Total minus equals b means subtract b from total, and so on. When working with loops to perform repetitive actions, it's often necessary to keep count by increasing or decreasing a number by 1. PHP has 2 special operators designed for this purpose, but they work in a way that can be rather confusing. Let's focus on adding 1 to a number. This is increment.php, which you can find in the chapter 4 04_03 folder of the exercise files. It begins by initializing number to 5. Then on the next line, number is incremented using the increment operator. That consists of 2 plus signs, and there must be no space between the variable and the operator. In this particular instance, the operator has been placed after the variable. Then we display the value of number and increment it on line 5 again. This time, though, the operator is placed in front of the variable. Again, there must be no space between the operator and the variable. Then on line 6, we display the value of number. So if we load this into a browser, it shows us the results. We started off with 5, incremented by 1, we get 6, incremented by 1, we get 7. No great surprise there, but let's continue working with the increment operator. What I'm going to do now is to increment number again, multiply it by 2, and assign the result to a variable. So the variable will be result, and then we've got our number, and we increment it and multiply it by 2, and so we know what the result is. We'll display that. We'll have a single quoted string, so we get plain text. Result is, then we'll concatenate the value of result on the end there, and also a line break. So number was 7, we're incrementing it and multiplying by 2. We would expect the result to be 16. Let's just save that and load the page in the browser. But it's not 16, it's 14. And this isn't a bug, it's the way that the increment operator is meant to work. And we can verify that by displaying the value of number on the next line. So echo number and a line break, and we save that and reload the page in the browser. Number is indeed 8. What has happened is it's been increased to 8 but the increment took place after the calculation. So let's try this again. I'm going to duplicate these 3 lines. And here, instead of having the increment operator after the variable, I'm going to put it in front of the variable. Save that and reload the page in the browser. And this time the result is 18. What has happened is that number has been incremented and then multiplied by 2. So that's the difference between putting the increment operator after and putting it before. If the increment operator is after, it's incremented after the calculation takes place. If it's before, it's incremented before the calculation takes place. And the decrement operator, which consists of 2 minus signs, works in exactly the same way. The only difference is that it subtracts 1 from the number instead of adding it. At first sight, the behavior of the increment and decrement operators seems odd, but it's easy to remember. When the operator is after the variable, the value is changed after any other calculation. The new value doesn't affect the calculation, and it doesn't become available until after the calculation has been completed. But when the operator is before the variable, the value is changed first, and the new value becomes part of the calculation. This confuses many beginners, so make sure you understand the difference made by the position of the increment and decrement operators. I hope you're up for another challenge. This one's pretty simple. At the beginning of this chapter, we looked at the modulus operator, which returns the remainder of a division. When converting minutes to hours and minutes, we can use this to get the minutes part of the calculation. This is integer_division.php, which you can find in the chapter 4, 04_04 folder of the exercise files. On line 4, total minutes is defined as 318, and then on the next line, the modulus operator is used to find the minutes part of the calculation. Surprisingly, PHP doesn't have an equivalent operator for integer division. In other words, the result of a division that discards the remainder. So my challenge to you is to find a way to calculate the hours part of this conversion. There are several ways to do it. It probably won't take you more than a couple of minutes to come up with a solution, but I suggest that you type out the code and test it to make sure it works correctly. In the next video, I'll show you a couple of solutions, one that works in all versions of PHP and another that works only in PHP 7. The challenge was to complete this conversion of total minutes into hours and minutes by calculating the number of hours. PHP doesn't have an operator for integer division, so we need to do a little extra work ourselves. The simple solution is to subtract the remainder from the original number and then divide it by 60. So I'm going to add in a new line on line 6. We'll save the result as hours. Then we need the original number, which was total minutes. Subtract the remainder, which was minutes. We got that from the modulus operator, and then divide by 60. But I hope you remember that division takes precedence over subtraction, so to get the correct result, we need to put this first part of the calculation into a pair of parentheses. And we can now replace the 2 question marks in the double quoted string with that variable hours. And if we save that and load the page into the browser, we get the result that the time taken was 5 hours and 18 minutes. So that was pretty simple. What I hope you didn't do was to use actual numbers in the calculation, apart from dividing by 60. The advantage of using variables is that the calculation still produces the correct result if we change the value of total minutes. So let's change total minutes from 318 to 640, and if we save that and reload in the browser, we now get that the time taken was 10 hours and 40 minutes. This solution works in all versions of PHP, but there's an alternative that works only in PHP 7. There was a proposal to introduce a new operator for integer division in PHP 7, but that was rejected. Instead, there's a new function called intDiv. We'll be looking at functions in more detail in Chapter 6, but this one's pretty simple to use. So I'm going to go back in here and I'll comment out that line. Then on the next line, we'll have our hours variable, and then we need the intDiv function. After the function name is a pair of parentheses, and between the parentheses you need to enter two numbers or variables that represent numbers and separate them with a comma. The first value is the number you want to divide, so that's total minutes, then the comma, and the second value is the number you want to divide it by, so that's 60. So if we save that and reload this in the browser, we should get the same answer as before. And indeed we do. But remember, of course, that your server must be using PHP 7 for this to work. It won't work in PHP 5. So there are two solutions to performing integer division in PHP. The simple one uses modulo division to find the remainder and then subtracts the remainder from the original number to get a value that will be divided an exact number of times. In PHP 7, though, you can use this intDiv function. This takes two arguments. The first argument is the numerator, in other words, the number you're dividing, and the second argument is the divisor, the number you're dividing it by.